author of my favorite book, The Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, which will be in the description in the top comment. But back to what you were saying, it has been a crazy week, and I was just thinking back to the day of the election. I had on my buddy Josh Newman, and we did an episode at like noon, so like nothing had even no counting yet. And the first 20 minutes was us just going, and he's an ex-Marine, he's like me, a little more right, and we were both like, but you know what? And the thing we kept saying was, no matter what, if this many people vote, we're like, this is a win for democracy. And that sounds cheesy and just puke. That sounds so nauseating. But we were like, you know what? Whoever wins, this is a win for democracy. So long as nothing is contested with the election. And we're both going, and then it gets quiet, and he goes, but now that we had that little moment of peace, let's be honest, there's no way this thing isn't going to be a shit show. And that's where we are right now. It's today the 7th, 8th, Sunday, November 8th, 2020. We are currently, Joseph R. Biden Jr. was announced as the president-elect, and Donald Trump is taking the Federal Election Commission chair, Trey Traynor, who said he believes there was fraud. And now the Biden campaign saying there wasn't fraud. And of course, 2020 can't just give us one nice thing. Of course, it has to be of course not. I don't know what kind of bullshit I was smoking. It's going to win. It's going to be a win for democracy. Nope. Lock and load. Here we fucking go. It's 1914, baby. Let's do it.
And of course, I live in Louisiana, which is one of the reddest states in the country.
Yeah, you're fucked.
And all I've just been telling people is that while nominally this is the result that I had been hoping for, I really didn't want it to happen this way.
Dude, and I was saying the day before, I was like, whoever wins, I hope it's just a blowout. Just so it's even if there is fraud, it's there's not fraud that much. I was like, I just hope someone, Trump or Biden, just takes it. And of course, 2020 can't give that to us.
Of course.
So fuck it, smoke it if you got them. But here we are, Roger. 242. You said so. What did you say the topic of today's was? It's the creation of
how humans became human.
Okay.
When because of course last week I read you the story of my fictional character Andrew, who was inserted in the human race to observe us becoming.
Yes.
Actually, he was supposed to observe us going extinct, and didn't quite work out.
Yes.
But there are two things that I want to touch on that clearly made the difference between us and the rest of the ecosystem. One of which would have happened before Andrew showed up, and the other of which happened well after, and in fact is described in one of his monologues. So the first is fire. Humans use fire. And modern humans have been around for between 200,000 and 300,000 years. But our ancestors, who were pre-human or proto-human, have been using it for more like 2 or 3 million. And we are also not the only animals that use fire. There are accounts in nature of birds of prey picking up burning sticks from wildfires and dropping them on other areas that are not burning yet, so that the new fire will drive out prey animals for them to hunt.
Dresden Part 2 or Part 1.
So the thing that is really critical, though, and nobody has a freaking clue when it happened, is when humans learned to make fire from scratch.
Okay.
It is thought that for a very long time, our ancestors harvested fire from natural sources like lightning strikes and carefully kept their flame alive, as seen in the movie Quest for Fire and so forth. But the problem with that is that if you are fire obligate, if you have reached a point where you can't survive without fire, then that is kind of precarious, because if your fire goes out, then you're at the mercy of nature
to provide it,
to be able to replace it.
Yeah.
And if you've reached a point, which I'm pretty sure we had by the time those recognizably modern humans came along a few 100,000 years ago, that's changed your diet. You're depending on eating a lot more meat than you could otherwise. You're eating plants that are not otherwise edible because you can cook them, so you have a lot more calories in your diet, which is good because it can support a very large brain. But if you need that and you can't make fire, then that is a rather dangerous situation to be in.
Yeah.
So our ancestors evolved on the savannah in Africa, and if you are in this position of needing natural fire, the savannah is actually not a bad place to be, because you're going to have those afternoon storms coming through very frequently. You're going to have lightning. You have plenty of fuel for the lightning to set on fire. And then once the storm passes, you've got good visibility to see the smoke from a long way away. So if you're looking for some fire, you've got a good chance of being able to find some in a reasonable amount of time. This is not true in a lot of ecosystems. If you live in a forest, even though lightning may cause fires, finding it is a big upward challenge and all. So now I am a noted non-anthropologist, non-expert in any sense, but I'm going to float a great big flyer here and say about 100,000 years ago, our ancestors, who were then modern humans, left Africa. And when they left Africa, they left it in a big way. Like within 20,000 years, humans were everywhere.
Yeah.
Okay. And I'm going to conjecture that what made that possible was the fire drill. Pointy stick.
Okay.
Do this.
Okay.
Make heat. And that may be the single most significant invention in the history of the human race, because that made it possible for us to live anywhere as long as there was fuel to make a fire. The fuel itself is what we're using to set the fire. Now, that leads to another interesting question. How the hell did anyone think of that? You're thinking, it's like, I'm thinking, I need to make fire. So I know I'll start with a pointy stick and I'll twirl it around real fast.
Maybe it's that, because if you do that, I don't know, maybe they thought there's a little warmth, right?
Well, I think what happened was they were trying to do something else, like put a hole in something. Okay. And they accidentally discovered that they were also making heat. Now, if you go back, we were using fire. So we had things like fire-treated stone tools, which made flint knapping work better. So we had a fairly advanced technology, even without the ability to build a fire. And among the other things that we were doing is we were killing a lot of animals. This is one of the things that being able to to use fire makes possible, is we can eat more meat, which means we're killing animals and we're getting all the other parts of their bodies that we don't eat, like the skin. That makes it possible to make clothes, to make bags for carrying things. In fact, you can make a pretty good leather bag that will carry water in primitive conditions. But if you don't have metal needles, then you've got to put all those holes for the laces to go through to sew them. And I suspect what that was being done. You can use bone needles, but they're not very strong. And the problem is that in those primitive situations, you don't have the ability to split leather. So the thickness of a hide was basically dependent on the animal that you killed. And a really thick piece of leather is very hard to punch a hole in. I've done it. So, so what I'm thinking is that they had either a bone or some other thing that they did this with to make holes that you could then run laces through in order to sew these things. And then for some reason, sometime, someone was trying to do this, and maybe they didn't have a bone. Maybe they used maybe they said, "Fuck it, I'll use a twig or a stick or whatever." Yeah. And maybe it wasn't a piece of leather that they were making, they were doing, because hides do have a lot of water in them, so they're not as easy. But maybe they were trying to make an amulet. Maybe they were doing it to a piece of bark so that they could hang it from their neck or something. And they notice they're not necessarily getting the hole that they wanted, but they're getting smoke. And one thing about humans is we're observant. That could have been a complete accidental thing, that it happened that moment instead of 50,000 years earlier or later. Yeah. But at some point, the magic mistake was made,
Yeah.
and someone noticed that you could use that mechanism to make fire.
Yeah.
And that makes it possible to live anywhere
Yeah.
that there is fuel.
Yeah.
You can live in the forest where you can't see the fire at a distance. You can live in the desert where there's not that much fuel, so there's not much chance that the lightning will set it on fire. You can basically live anywhere that the means are available. And we proceeded to do exactly that. We know that within about 20,000 years out after leaving Africa, we were everywhere. We were in Australia. They still can't figure that one out. The only place we weren't there was the Americas, and it took a while to get across the ocean. So that was a critical thing, and it was probably a complete accident. No one knows when it happened.
Yeah.
All we know about the fire drill is that the fire bow, which is the fire drill, but instead of doing this, you use a bow to do it. Those definitely were at a very high rate of development 7,000 years or so ago. We actually have artifacts.
Okay.
But that's because by then they were making them out of stuff other than wood. The thing is, something that you use to start fires that burns is not going to tend to be preserved very well.
Yeah, okay.
In the fossil record.
Yeah, that's true. That's true. Upside, it brings fire. Downside, it's flammable.
Yeah. So now we know that in the very distant past that people were using fire, because we have these fossil sites of campfires. We can tell the fire was tended. We can tell that it was used to do cooking or to treat rocks for flint knapping. But what we can't tell is how the fire was set.
Yeah.
And that's probably something we'll never know for certain. But my gut feeling is that when you look at why we were stuck in Africa for 150, 200,000 years, and then all of a sudden we're all over the world, to me, that's a very good candidate explanation.
Yeah.
So fire is really useful for much more than warmth. There is the fact that you can eat a lot more meat, because our digestive system was never really adapted to eating a lot of meat. We were never really pure carnivores. But more than that, you can eat all these plants that don't want you to eat them. So it's like, there's a lot of plants that want you to eat their parts. A citrus tree wants you to eat the thing so that you'll take its seeds around and scatter them, and that's part of the bargain. It gives you a little free energy. You scatter its seeds. We're all partners here in this great global thing. A potato does not want you to eat the potato. It wants that energy to be available for its sprouts and the young plant. So those plants lock the energy up in various ways that make it very hard to digest them. And one of the things that cooking does is it unlocks that stuff. Not only that, but if you're eating these plants that are generally not that edible, then it's easier to store them because they're not going to rot. They're not going to be eaten as easily by vermin. So that gives you the ability to store food for a barren season, like the winter in Europe.
Yeah, or the 7 seasons.
Yeah, so it's really a big boost. And so that's how we go from being just this local species in not even the entire continent, but as far as we know, mostly the grasslands of Africa, and then being all over the world. So the thing there is the next big development. Of course, Andrew would not have been there because I think that's something that happened 100,000 years ago when we left Africa, and Andrew was dropped here 60,000 years ago in my story. But what he would have seen is the human race spreading out, moving into all of these habitats that very few animals could live in all of the places that humans could live even 50,000 years ago. And then we developed agriculture, which is the next big
Yeah, the next
power
push.
thing.
I was gonna say you pointed out something interesting, the fire bow and the ability to now bring that everywhere. Isn't that kind of in an odd way? It's reminiscent of now, right? What's the big thing? Who's gonna build the best battery, right? The entire EV market, solar panels. It's all about extra percent efficiency and lithium. It's just the fire bow. It's just another fire bow, right?
Yeah, and really there is a great deal of commonality across the generations as you look at these things. That's one of the things that I want to draw, is that these things that happened in the ancient past that started us on this path are things that are continuing to happen.
Yeah.
And in a lot of ways more and more often, because we have more and more opportunities. But they're also things that made us what we are.
Mm-hmm.
Now, before we did last week's episode, we had talked a little about agriculture, and like you had said, yeah, well, suppose it's like somebody says, look, we just need to do this, bitch. We need to get this done, take a year off, work it out. And it's like, that's not the way it happened.
Yeah.
I mean, that's not human nature.
Yeah, that's not human nature at all. Yeah.
So let's look at what probably did happen. Okay. We know that agriculture was invented in the Fertile Crescent, in what today is the Middle East. Mm-hmm. And I mentioned before that I think a lot of technology arises when you have a balance between the tension of something being too hard to do at all and so easy to do that it's not even worth it, because you're living in paradise. Why go to the trouble of inventing anything?
Yeah.
So what you're looking at in this part of the world, first of all, it's got to be temperate all year round, because you can't have like a harsh winter and do this sort of thing. You've got to have a fixed village.
Yeah.
Or you can't do agriculture. So you can't be nomadic.
Yeah.
And invent agriculture.
Yeah.
So that means you're probably close to the equator. You're in a mild, temperate climate. But on the other hand, it can't be too nice, or you're just gonna lie in the sun and just eat the coconuts or whatever. So what I'm thinking is that you have these villages, and they're sending out parties to do to go hunt for game, to forage for things, but they're having to maybe take day trips to do it. So you don't have everything you need right next to the village. What you probably built the village near is your source of water. That would have been the most important, most difficult thing. Yeah. So you might have to walk a day and a half to get to some resource that is valuable to you. But that's not a very big deal. I mean, it's a comfortable life compared to being fully nomadic, for example. But what I'm thinking is that at some point, someone has walked a day and a half to get to the field where the tubers grow, and they're like, we ought to just take some of the fucking seeds and scatter them by the village and see if the damn things grow there. That would be a lot more. Yeah. So you're not looking at a big investment of effort at that stage of things. What you're looking at is something that might just be an impulse. Like,
sure.
So you're not going to prepare the ground. You're not going to do all this fancy shit. Yeah. It's more like, we know that these things reproduce this way. Let's take some of the fuckers back.
Take it.
Scatter them on the ground and see if they'll grow closer to home.
Yeah.
And it worked.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that's such a big win that you then start looking at, well, maybe we can do that with some of this other stuff. Yeah. Maybe you start to notice that these plants like having a lot of sunlight. These plants like having more shade. These need to have water and so forth. And you can see this growing incrementally, rather than it being like we went from being semi-nomadic or whatever, hunter-gatherers, to having this elaborate technology that existed even in the earliest Bible stories of doing cultivation and plowing and all the rest of this. So what this buys you is you're getting way more food, which means your population can grow. We know that human females are more fertile on a modern high-carb diet than they are on a typical hunter-gatherer diet. There are natural mechanisms that limit fertility. which the modern diet short circuits.
Okay.
So, and they've studied this pretty closely with the remaining hunter-gatherer tribes that exist. It's like they don't have nearly as many children as you would expect, considering they don't have birth control or any of the other modern technologies. Sure. But it's the diet seems to discourage ovulation when you don't have enough calories or you don't have the right kind of thing. So the starches and carbohydrates are just like crack cocaine for our metabolism.
Yeah.
So, and this is, of course, what we're doing, what we're eating when we're cultivating these foods. Once we cook them, they're long chain starches that the plant really intended for its own sprouts to be using, grains, which we can keep fairly stable until we turn them into bread. So you have a thing where this steam, this is going to steamroll, getting gradually more and more complicated until we get up to the point where you're burning out the soil because you're doing it so much.
Yeah.
And then by that time, you've probably become obligate to agriculture.
Yeah.
And so you have to go find another field. Now you've learned that you have to clear away the native vegetation, dig some trenches, put the seeds carefully in the little rows. This is not something that was necessarily all discovered at the same time. But as long as each incremental step gave enough of an improvement that you couldn't ignore it, and it was like, damn, we need to do more of that.
Yeah.
Then it's going to grow. It's going to continue until you are farmers.
Yeah.
So you've got everything invested in this plot, these plots of land around your village, which are now producing 10 or 100 times as much food as you had when you were doing these day trips out to the naturally occurring fields. But you're also burning out the soil because you don't know about crop rotation. And eventually, this brings you in contact because you're moving further out. You're maybe starting new villages or whatever, and you meet the neighbors who are doing the same thing. And here is a critical thing, something that I ran across while I was reading up on this for this thing, is that for many years it was thought that whoever it was that invented agriculture went on to overrun all their neighbors because it would be such an advantage.
Yeah.
And in the last 10 or 15 years, they've been doing PCR DNA analysis of these artifacts and all that we've had in our possession for a long time, but we didn't have an ability to run the DNA and find out who they were. And what we found out is that these groups of people were stable. It wasn't a matter of somebody in one area overran everyone else. For thousands of years, these tribes and villages were stable. They were the same group of mostly related genetic families, and they didn't mix a lot. You had some, because you've got, obviously, there's always going to be the guy with wanderlust who's going to go out and become a trader, just wants to see what's on the other side of that mountain over there. Yeah. And you don't need a lot of those people to spread an idea.
Yeah.
You just need the guy to come, hey, I'm from over there,
Yeah.
Hey, we've got this really cool thing we've been doing where we take the seeds back and just scatter them by the village, and it's really cool, man. It's like we don't have to walk so far no more.
Yeah.
And an idea like that can spread much faster than conquest.
Okay.
So if you think about it, how long would you think it takes to walk from New York to Los Angeles?
I mean, you gotta. So I'm looking at it as how long physically, or there has to be the incentive to go, because sometimes it's not how long.
Physically, we'll assume that people have the incentive to make at least part of this journey for other reasons.
Okay.
Maybe it's simple trade, but
3 months in a covered wagon. So I don't know, 2 to 4 years.
That's about it.
2 to 4 years walking.
Actually, you could walk it in less than 6 months. You would have a couple of mountain ranges to deal with, but assuming that you have a way to deal with that, you can walk 3,000 miles in a few months.
Okay.
And it's not even that uncomfortable. You could make it in 2 months if you wanted to run the whole way and spend all of your time moving. But assuming that you want to spend some time to smell the flowers and forage for more food and stuff like that, you're probably looking at 4 to 6 months.
And that's with the incentive that they want to go, though.
Yeah, and we know that, for example, the Native Americans did this.
Yeah.
We have examples where feathers from exotic birds were traded from Central America and ended up in Arizona.
Jesus Christ. Yeah, I watched a documentary about how the Native Americans, they said they were all built like marathon runners, and they'd run, but then they also like discovered some early form of like fermented grain alcohol. So apparently these guys would run all day, get blitzed around the campfire, and then wake up and run the next day. Holy shit, I can't go to the bathroom after a night of drinking. These guys are just like, we're running to fucking New England.
Well, it's because you're burning the energy.
Okay.
That's the thing, is that alcohol is a very powerful source of energy if you are exercising and burning it.
Yeah.
It still gets you drunk.
Yeah.
But you don't get fat.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you burn it. So it's not like poisoning your liver and all, because you're actually metabolizing it and turning it into energy.
All those Michelob Ultra commercials.
Yeah. On a side note, did you see when Steve Colbert and Elizabeth Warren were on Colbert's on the Tonight Show?
When?
And he was showing Warren around the state, and they had a beer because Elizabeth Warren had this have a beer or whatever with me thing. Yeah, and so she ordered a Michelob Ultra, and Colbert goes, yeah, has anyone ever told you the joke about why Michelob Ultra is like having sex in a canoe? And she's like, no. He says, because they're both fucking close to water.
That's a dad joke. That's where you look at your dad and you're like, I'll give it to you, but don't say that again, right? It's one of those puns where you're like, that's strike one, Buster. You get two more.
Yeah, well, Elizabeth Warren, who had learned the phrase earlier, then said, bless your heart.
Yeah, bless your heart. Yeah. If you say bless, having lived in Georgia for 15 years, if you hear bless your heart, that's a kind way of saying like that was your first and only strike. Yeah. Right? Bless your heart, you're like, I got it. Sorry.
So anyway, where I was going before the side digression was that the knowledge of doing agriculture spread throughout Mesopotamia much faster than conquest probably would have. It wasn't a matter of one people invented it and then used this power to overwhelm all their neighbors and take over. It was more that all of these people who lived there since before continued to live there, but they were using the same techniques, presumably because they were learning from one another as they figured out how to take advantage of this. But then, of course, they were also burning out the soil and eventually coming into conflict with one another because they were using up the resources. They were turning it into a desert. If anyone ever tells you that humans can't change the climate, you direct them to the Middle East because it wasn't a desert 10,000 years ago, and we are responsible for that.
Yeah, we can do whatever the fuck we want.
So, but that's what got the ball rolling. And so these people eventually they were forced into conflict with one another. So they started the more modern techniques of making war, which led to the Metal Ages and all of the other higher technologies that obviously snowballed after that. But that was kind of the seed that started the second wave of human technology. So we had gone from just being in Africa to being everywhere, probably because of the ability to make fire at will. And now we had the ability to amplify the fecundity of the earth and support a much larger population, which allowed us to overwhelm the entire ecosystem, including other humans. Because when I found out that I was pre-diabetic, one of the books that I read was talking about how unhealthy the modern diet really is for you as an individual. It's a great thing for the human race and society
as a whole. Yeah.
Not so good for you as an individual, but it succeeded because 100 malnourished farmers can overwhelm one healthy specimen of a hunter-gatherer society and take over the land and the territory.
Yeah. So I was going to say the modern diet is kind of like, it's kind of like kamikaze. It's like not good for you individually, but for the whole movement, it works.
Yeah. So, I think my favorite story about illustrating that was when people from Europe first met the Mongols in the steppes of northern Asia. And of course, these were nomadic peoples. They did animal husbandry, but they didn't farm because they were nomads.
Yeah.
So they would have like their herd of goats and shit. And their diet consisted almost entirely of milk and meat and things that could be foraged. And when the Europeans met them, they were like, one of the things that came up was, how long do you guys live? And they were like, oh man, our chiefs live to be 80, 90 years old, and they're riding horses the whole time. And the Europeans are like ours are, in their 60s, and they get gout and they become done up. Yeah. And the Mongols are just like, y'all don't eat right, or they were not impressed.
Yeah.
But that's the difference. And the thing is, you can't support the population density on the primitive diet. Yeah. Now, the advantage the Mongols had when when other people moved in is that the climate was not in that sweet spot that made farming attractive. So their old ways, they're still, a lot of them still live that way today in 2020. They have the herd, they follow the grasses, and they mostly eat milk and meat and live in yurts. Yeah. The thing that happened next, though, is that you did have all of this trade. You had peoples coming into conflict. If you look at, Europe has been just people fighting each other practically since people moved there from wherever they came from. And that's because of high population, because you're farming. You wouldn't live in Europe at all in any population density without farming. Yeah. And so, but you're also having all these other things. You're growing this large population. So you're running up against your neighbors, and you're wanting their resources. They're wanting yours. You're trading because there's things that you realize you need that aren't available locally. And this is what kind of got the whole third level civilization ball rolling, is that once you've got agriculture, then you've got a large population of people that you can use to make an army or to make large-scale changes in your local environment, such as clearing and plowing fields, which a few thousand years ago, no one would have even thought of trying.
Yeah.
Because, was that really worth all the effort? Well, what they found out is that it is, in fact, worth the effort.
If you can do it.
But they found that out incrementally. By gradually doing more stuff. So you do a little thing, like bringing some seeds back and scattering them before you eat the rest of what you brought back. And then next season, you've got a whole bunch of shit close to the village. Hey, that worked good.
Yeah.
Maybe we can do this other thing. Well, that didn't work so well. Yeah. Maybe it's because the native plants crowded them out. So maybe we should clear the vegetation first. And so you can see, as the reward makes it worth the effort, then they get more and more elaborate trying to meet the needs of these organisms that they are trying to husband.
Yeah.
And until you get to this situation 7,000-8,000 years ago where you're plowing, you're clearing, you're planting, you've got this whole elaborate thing, and you're eventually also going to run up against burning out the land and having to do it again somewhere else.
Yeah.
So
we went from fire to little village to bringing the seeds back to now we've got a ton of excess energy and ability to and not have a malnourished population, and thus it is now energetically profitable, if you will, to use an army to mold your reality, both culturally and or just physically. We're going to build a road or whatever, and it's. Can we circle back to fire for just a second? I must have blanked out. What was it that? Why was it that fire led to the village? I understood everything up to the fire, and then from go get the seeds and toss them by the village. I think I blacked out for a second.
What fire led to us was us being able to live anywhere.
Okay.
And that meant that we had people living in these areas where you had the next sweet spot of equilibrium between it being easy enough that you don't have to be nomadic, but hard enough that it was worth going to a little effort to make it easier.
Okay. So
that was the thing that happened in the Middle East. Was it was easy enough to live that you could live one place all year long, but it was hard enough that it was worth taking some effort to develop things.
Okay.
And so that's where, and that is a theme that I think repeats itself throughout human history. It's, we were talking about civilization, which, as we know it today, which we normally associate with arising in Europe, where you get large nations and all. And again, that was because you've got a situation where it is hard enough to live that it is worth forming these large associations, but it is easy enough to make it possible.
Yeah.
So if you don't need to do something like create a nation state, then there's no reason to. It's just a pain in the ass.
Yeah.
But if you live in Alaska in the 13th century, you're not going to do it because it's not possible.
Yeah.
So in Europe, though, everything came together, and then you have the pressure from your neighbors who want what you have and you wanting what they have. And so you're inventing all of these ever more elaborate ways to kill one another and take their stuff. And that also drives the wheels of progress. There's a throwaway line in the Curators where one of the curators says, "We didn't anticipate the effect that it would have, even among those of you who are not murderous, having to deal with the ones of yours that are."
Yeah.
And so you still have to defend yourself, even if you're not one of these people that's going to go out and wave a broadsword around and kill your neighbors. You have to worry about those guys coming over from the other direction and be able to deal with them. And that, of course, is what drove the next wave of technology, where you're developing metallurgy, where you're developing weapons, where you're developing things like ceramics, which kills there's this gradual accumulation of modalities that accelerates as these things become more common. And you always see a particular place where it seems everything goes vroom. And of course, the United States was that place in the Civil War.
Yeah.
A lot of the really modern thinking about war and technology all occurred between the Revolutionary War, the Civil War, and the Great War, World War I, because in the United States, you had these vast natural resources that the Europeans couldn't even imagine.
Yeah.
And all you needed was a conflict to prod us into doing something with them.
Yeah.
And when that happened, well, let's face it, we built the freaking atomic bomb.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
that's when we have that external force. That's when shit gets going. Roger, monologue for 60 seconds. I gotta pee really badly. I'm sorry. I'm a child. Tell them where they can find your book.
Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect is available both ebook and paper from Amazon.com. If you go to Lulu.com, you can buy it in paper from them, and I get a lot more money because Amazon doesn't take their cut. They're the ones who actually print it. It is also available for free if you want to read it in your web browser at localroger.com. That was how it was originally released. That's the basics. I have some other stuff up at localroger.com too. I really need to post a link to the Curators, which was published on Reddit. Most of my stuff is available for free. But a lot of my readers expressed a desire for more convenient versions that they could read on their Kindle or in the bathtub. So that was actually a request that I got. Here he comes.
My apologies. Yeah, so first wave fire, second wave agriculture, third wave it is now profitable energetically and socially and culturally and developmentally to start standing armies.
Yes.
Okay.
And so you enter the Bronze Age and then the Iron Age, and then of course there's a Dark Age because we got a little too good at it for a while. But then in roughly the 12th, 13th centuries, things started to accelerate again and never turned back.
Yeah.
So the quintessential example of something that would probably have never happened anywhere else is, in fact, the atomic bomb. Because I cannot imagine any other society going to the effort that we did for something that might not have worked.
Yeah.
Now, once you have shown them that it works, that's different.
Yeah.
Because now you have it and they don't. But they know that it's possible.
Yep.
So now it's worth going to all that effort.
Yeah.
Because you know that it's possible. And there's a lot of examples of that too in human history, where the secret of XYZ is that it's possible to XYZ at all.
Mm-hmm.
And once you know that it's possible and that it will work, then the first place that invents a farming technique, it's like a lark. But then once someone from another society sees what you're doing and that you're supporting all these people, and that the individual labor cost is this, and that, then it becomes, then they go back home and they're like, look, this is what we got to do. And they really do take the year off and, and say, we need to clear this field. This is what we need to do. I've seen how it works. Because you've seen what's possible, and you have seen the fact that these guys are building weapons. And they need more land, and they're not that far away. So maybe we ought to pursue the same thing. Anyway, that's kind of the thing, is that it's the same thing happening over and over again, but at greater frequency.
Mm-hmm.
The iteration, it took 100,000 years to get fire, to make fire from scratch and leave Africa. Then it took 10,000 years for agriculture to take over the entire world. It took 1,000 years for the iron and bronze for the Middle Ages to be almost everywhere in the world. Because let's face it, when that ship comes over your horizon, with that smoke coming out of the thing and all, it's like, you don't know it yet, but your whole shit is about to change.
Yeah. Because
you're either going to figure out what they're up to and meet them at parity, or they're going to crush you like an insect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, and what's often happens is they're going to enslave you so that you can help them make more food for themselves.
Yeah.
Or whatever else they're doing.
Sure.
The Europeans ended up doing what the Romans had only been able to dream of, and mapped and conquered the entire world, with a few asterisks here and there. But basically, there was a period of time when there wasn't a square inch anywhere on the earth that had humans living on it that some European country decided, didn't think they owned.
Mm-hmm.
And that happened because of technology. But that technology came about because of the unique circumstances of the European climate and the social and political situation that drove those advances, so that when they went out sailing around the world, they would be in a position to just curb stomp anyone who stood in their way. Now, that's not a very good thing for a lot of reasons. In a lot of places, it was a very bad thing, but it's how we got where we are.
So what's the big one after standing armies, or is it just a repetition of what you said, kind of the same pattern?
Well, really, once you get to the Civil War, what you've had is a very repetitive acceleration of technological modalities. The Civil War was probably the single biggest burst of technological innovation in the history of the human race at that point.
Really?
Yeah, because you had submarines, you had Ironside warships, you had improved firearms. That was the first war that was informed by the American method of manufacture, and they found out that firearms that used interchangeable parts really were a better deal.
Yeah,
the people who had those tended to win
kill
battles
everybody.
Against
aerial surveillance.
I mean, if you look at they were steeped in the idea of innovation to a sense that had never been true before. Even before, you had things like, someone invents the trebuchet.
Yeah.
Okay. What else is going on? I mean, how big a thing is this? A siege weapon like that has very specific purpose. At some point, it didn't exist, and then later it did. But it's not like the whole burst of things that happened in the Civil War. Because you had this society, we had a lot of brilliant minds, we had a lot of natural resources and raw materials, and we had a credible enemy that on both sides saw it as they will stop at nothing to ruin our shit.
So, is that the upside of 2020? Civil War? We jump forward into a new era? Not good for us, but good for the species as a whole.
It's happened before.
I hope not, but let's observe the patterns and realize, oh fuck, it might still apply.
Yeah. Well, if you think about it, we've had several waves since then, because World War I was as much of an advanced driver as the Civil War was, starting from the Civil War level tech. Those countries, the Europeans and the Americans, spent that 60 years between the Civil War and World War I just honing everything. So you had these high-speed repeating guns. You had steam engines powering ships to a degree of performance that had never been seen before. You had the internal combustion engine. You had the beginnings of things like, the first tanks in warfare. And we consider World War I to be kind of primitive because they had the trench warfare, and we still had people doing the cavalry charge. But now they were getting mowed down by the artillery in ways that didn't even happen in the Civil War, except for maybe Pickett's charge or something.
Yeah.
But that, and the thing is, so you had all these people that had been thinking of this stuff for 60 years, and they were validated. Because it was technology that turned the war. Mm-hmm. The people who had the technology were able to overwhelm the ones who didn't. Yeah. And that was what decided it. Then in World War II, the same thing. Of course, the atomic bomb being the ultimate example, but there were others. In fact, I've got a book here. I was loaned this book by a friend, Soldat, by Siegfried Dave, on something I can't really pronounce. This is a German soldier's firsthand account of his experience in World War II. And the frontispiece of the book says, "We were not Nazi soldiers. We were German soldiers fighting for our homeland." And This guy who wrote this got super lucky because he was at the Eastern Front and he got injured like 3 times in ways that forced him to send him back behind the lines to go to hospital. He was in the end, he was able to get his wife out and his 2 children to West Germany, and he ended up in the United States at the end of it all in the 60s when he wrote that. But he took careful notes of everything, and he was in the process of being promoted to the high command at the time when they were being defeated, when it was very clear to everyone that the Axis was about to go down in flames. And it was like, I was going to be a member of the general staff, but I might not be a member for very long because the war was lost.
Yeah, towards the end, getting promoted to the upper echelon, that was a death sentence. It's like, fuck no.
Yeah. Well, and he spent 7 years in a Russian prison camp. Over it too. And he, as he said, if they had found that you ate a chicken in Russia, if you ate a Russian chicken, then that was taking the resources. 25 years in a work camp, and he managed to avoid all these little traps that were being set for the old German military guys when they were interrogated. And so they would interrogate you every few months and carefully look for inconsistencies in your story and all. So he just got very lucky that he was never in a village that got massacred, of which there were plenty, and the individual German soldiers didn't have a lot of control over whether they were in a situation like that or not. But you got captured by the Russians and they found out you were there, you're screwed.
Game over.
So but the reason I brought that up is that he was originally an artillery officer. And at the beginning of World War II, all of the German artillery units were horse-drawn.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like he had joined the army thinking that, he would learn glamorous new things. And he ended up, half of his job was tending horses because they used horses to drag the artillery around.
In World War II?
In World War II.
Oh, I didn't know that.
Yeah, and it was that way until fairly late in the war, as a matter of fact, because that was the known technology. We said when they did get a mechanized artillery unit, it changed the whole way that they related to things, because with the horse-drawn artillery, then half your job was taking care of the horses. Wherever you went, you then had to take care of the horses. You had to bed them, you had to feed them. Whereas with the mechanized artillery, you just turn the key off and go sleep somewhere. And when you come back, you turn the key on and go about your business. And but that didn't happen. They didn't really have those in large numbers until like 1944. You're talking about like fairly late in the war, they started to mechanize these things, which is surprising because the Germans had so much invested in wonder weapons, and but on the ground, they're still dragging. This was on the Eastern Front in Russia. They're using horses to drag the artillery around as the Eastern Front moves back and forth.
Okay.
And I didn't know that either before I read that.
That's insane.
So that tells you how things weren't even. There were all these advances being made. The Americans didn't bring any friggin' horses to World War II.
Yeah.
And neither did the British. But that may be because, again, if horses is what you have and it's possible to bring the horses and that's what you're used to, you bring the horses. If you're having to ship everything across the Atlantic Ocean, you're not going to bring horses.
No. Yeah.
You're gonna find something better. So again, it's that tension between being difficult and enough that you want to find something better, but not so difficult that you can't find something better. Yeah. And really, we're almost in the same thing today with it's not so much war, but things like technology, computer technology, energy generation. We're we're still accelerating and finding new modalities to solve the problems that our last modalities caused, which we pretty much.
Yeah, it's kind of. Yeah, it's a weird. Yeah, it's a weird. It's almost like it's a huge space-time engine almost. It's like there are these pistons that take like thousands of years to turn, but it's like this causes a problem, and now I gotta drink because I'm hungover. Well, I'm hungover because I drank, but there's no time to think about it. You just gotta. But it's this weird engine that's just tearing through time, sort of pulling us with it. It's a weird. It's an engine. Right?
I'm hungover, but a little hair of the dog will fix that.
Yeah, because I got shit to do. I got shit to do. I gotta have a drink, right? And it's this weird. Do you think? I don't know if I'm cutting off your lecture. Do you think COVID, or do we can get to it? Do you think COVID could be it's forcing us to adapt?
Well, the last pandemic that we had like this was, of course, 100 years ago in 1918.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's forcing us to confront some of the problems that we've caused because of our population density. We've actually been very lucky that something like this didn't happen earlier.
Yeah.
And in fact, the 1918 pandemic was directly caused by World War I, because you had all of these soldiers crammed into transports coming home, and that made it possible for the disease to incubate and spread among a lot of people who didn't realize how sick they were until they had gone on to infect a lot of people when they got back home. In this case, we didn't have that. But what we do have now is global travel on a scale that simply didn't exist in 1918. The idea that an ordinary person will spend a week's pay, get on an airplane, and a few hours later be on the other side of the continent was not a thing that happened in that time. So we've known that there are problems with things like agricultural pests, which is why you have the inspection stations when you enter certain states. But we haven't really had a reason to take that stuff super seriously.
Yeah.
We haven't had it hit that hard. Yeah. And I think there's still a lot of denial about it, even at this point. Right now, there's more people who have COVID infections as we speak than there have ever been this year. It's in the third wave. It's accelerating again. And you've got the people who are saying, well, maybe we just need to let Grandpa die.
Yeah.
It's like the economy can't take this. And all right, there's a part of me that can see that argument. If I was assigned it for the debate team, I could probably argue that side.
Yeah.
But I would probably say it sounded better in the original German.
Fuck. Woo. Roger. fucking kidney shot.
Just saying.
Yeah.
And that's one of the striking things in the Man in the High Castle series.
Yeah.
Is that one of the characters is an American. Now, it's set in the 1960s, which was contemporary when Philip K. Dick wrote the original novel.
Yeah.
But it's in an alternate world where the Axis powers won World War II.
Yeah.
And so one of the characters is an American who had been in the American army, but he was recruited, swore loyalty to the Germans, and now has a high rank in the German occupational force.
Yeah.
But his son has a congenital debilitating disease. And the Nazis' prescription for this is euthanasia.
Yeah.
So there's a whole subplot where this fairly powerful guy who has some means is trying to figure out how to keep his son alive because he's not genetically worthy. He doesn't meet the standards. And this was the way that they thought. They also had an interesting thing. I noticed in The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, William Shirer says that toward the beginning of the war, when you had the Hitler Youth camps and all, they had a shockingly high rate of pregnancy among the girls who went to these things. And the official, this pissed off the parents in a big way, but the party liked it because this meant more Germans.
More Aryans.
It meant more Aryans, and they didn't care.
They started like breeding farms.
Yeah, that was the idea, is that anything that encourages more Aryan Germans to be born is a good thing.
Yeah.
Screw your morality, whatever. Yeah, that's not important.
Yeah. They took a lot of things to. They're the society. Nazi Germany is a society that did like. We know it's bad, but it's their whole thing is but. If you go, it's a weird road. If you ever go look at the you don't even need to watch the series, but if you just go look at the comments of any of the clips on YouTube, you go to any of them and it's like they're all these memes. It's like that awkward moment when you realize it might not have been so bad. If it's just like woo, but it'll have like you'll look at the comment, it'll be like 9.4K likes, and you're like Jesus Christ. And it's like oh wow, technology might have been good, and it's like. Ooh, maybe, and it's just like, oh Jesus! You look at a lot of the comments are like, doesn't look that bad, and you're like, ooh,
yeah.
Ooh.
Well, and the thing is, as far as the topic of the day, the Nazis were, of course, very enthusiastic about innovation and new technologies.
Yeah.
This is they never met a V weapon they didn't like.
Yeah.
In a lot of cases, you can make a solid case that they would have been much better off just building more conventional bombers than building V2s and rocket planes and all this other shit. But they loved this shit. They were looking for that the magic button or whatever that would and they were kind of rooting around on the road to that with atomic energy.
Yeah.
But they basically got screwed by Operation Barbarossa.
Hitler. What if there was no Hitler, we'd probably be speaking German right now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. If something had.
If he had died after he got it, because he had to get it up and going. He's the psychopath that got it up and going.
Right. But if something had happened, if the assassination attempt had succeeded.
Yeah, that's kind of crazy. If it had succeeded, the Germans might have won, which is crazy.
Yeah, because they or at the very least they would have sued for truce on terms that would have left them a very great power in the world, instead of the defeated wreck that they were after the war. And so it was really kind of crazy that. And the thing is, Philip K. Dick saw that very clearly too, because the other tension you have in The Man in the High Castle is that nominally the Japanese and the Germans are allies. So they've partitioned the United States.
Mm-hmm.
There's like a no man's land around the Rocky Mountains. Yeah. So the Japanese have San Francisco and the West Coast, and the Germans have the East Coast. But everyone knows that eventually the Nazis are going to atomic bomb the Japanese.
Yeah.
It's like everyone knows. It's like this thing.
Yeah.
It's the subplot in the background. The Japanese know it because they don't have anything like this technology.
Yeah.
And so they're just like dreading it and wondering what the hell they can do about it.
Yeah.
While the Nazis just like, yeah, right.
Yeah. Just
we're going to do whatever we want.
In time. There's no universe where the Japanese don't get A-bombed. It doesn't even, it's like fuck, even in the sci-fi you always get bombed. It's just that's the arc. The black guy always dies first in the 80s action movie. The Japanese die. It's just you get A-bombs. It's just, I'm sorry, it's part of the thing. The guy gets the girl, the best friend dies sacrificing himself, the old man gives the lesson at the end, right? There's all your son and the Japanese get A-bombed. It's just part of it. It's just part of it, right?
Although one of the wrinkles in the story is that since the Japanese have occupied San Francisco is one of the cities that gets A-bombed.
Yeah.
At least in the future, in the glimpses of the future. Now, the story kind of thus far has averted that, but that's part of the whole story of the man in the high castle itself and the artifacts that they're collecting. But there are people who have visions of San Francisco being nuked.
Yeah.
Because it's the Japanese holding, and the Japanese are going to get nuked.
Yeah. I never actually finished it. What, for spoiler, I guess, for anyone listening, so don't listen, 543 spoiler. How does it end? I'm not going to lie. I started it and I got like 80% of the way through, and then I don't remember what it was. I think I started a job this past summer, but I know they've got like the portal thing, and there's like the universes, and they can see like universes where like Americans won the war. Is that who the man of the high castle is?
Well, in the series, they have films.
Yeah.
In the book, there is actually a book.
Okay.
But when they made the Amazon Prime series,
that's what I saw.
They're finding film strips.
Yeah.
And they show universes that aren't ours.
Yeah.
And so one of those is the universe where San Francisco gets atomic bombed. Another is where one of the principal characters turns out to be a spy for the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And to thoroughly spoil everything, one of the last revelations is that the actual man in the high castle is Adolf Hitler. He has been collecting all of these things, and there's a scene at the end where the guy whose son is going to be euthanized ends up going to Germany and meets with the Fuhrer, who is by this time very old and ill. Yeah. But he is the one who has been collecting these films and learning from them, and it's like he's learned that it can't go the way he thought it would when he was young. So it's transformed him. But now his staff, the Goering and the people who are around him, are plotting to take his place, and maybe even to kill him, so that they can proceed with their plan to atomic bomb the Japanese. And he is actually not in favor of this plan. Wow. Now that's the series version. The way that the novel ended was quite different.
Okay, because I didn't read. I only saw them, and I think I pieced it together, right? Because they find. And
personally, I think that the series is better.
Really? Okay.
Because one of the things Philip K. Dick himself complained about bitterly is he said that he used the Yi King, mm-hmm. which we talked about recently, to write the book.
Yeah.
But when he got to the end, it refused to give him an ending. And so he had to think of something himself. And he complained about that bitterly. And now my experience is that's typical of the way divination devices work.
Yeah. The guru appears when you're ready, and the guru disappears when you're truly ready.
Well, in particular, the tarot seems to be designed to have a personality that wants to educate you, to teach you, to be in touch with your feelings, and also it will tell you things up to a point, but then expects you to figure the rest out for yourself. Otherwise, it's been wasting its time.
Yeah.
But the ending and the way that things are tied together in the series, to me, works better than what Dick came up with in the original novel. Now, that's not to say it still won the Hugo Award and the Nebula Award, and it was like one of the most famous science fiction novels of all time. But sometimes they really do improve it when they adapt it for TV.
Yeah, that's probably the only example, right? And you can spoil it for me. I don't care. I'm ADD. I'm not going to go back and watch it anyway. Because I do remember they're finding the film strips, right? And it's like, these are fake, and the guy's going, these are too good to be fake, meaning they have to be authentic. So I'm guessing is it that those are actual films from alternate universes, and they're trying to cover it up so people don't know that there's a possibility where the Nazis don't win?
Yeah, well, they are actually genuinely from alternate realities.
Yeah.
And the Japanese hero ends up actually transporting himself to one of the alternate realities, which looks very much like ours. Toward the end of the last season that aired. And he's horrified because people aren't treating him with deference, and because in his timeline, the Japanese are the rulers of this planet. And when he steps over and finds himself in a United States that looks an awful lot like ours, he's nobody.
Yeah.
He's just another Japanese guy.
Yeah.
Nobody's kowtowing to him or paying him anything. But yeah, so it's the mechanism is that the films are tying together these different branches of reality that are gone in different directions.
You know what they should have done is they should have had him come to our America, and he's just, you kind of see him just, you know, it's not good, it's not bad. He's just like, you know, what, he gets a job, he gets an apartment, whatever, and have a drink on the weekend. And one thing he does is he starts watching series, and he downloads Amazon Prime. And then it starts as the first episode.
Yeah, it's still set in the 1960s, so none of that existed.
I would just I don't know. You would just have it go by like another 40 years, 50 years, and then you see him as an old man, and he's got a tablet, and he finds the Amazon series. It starts as he hits play, and the beginning credits come up.
Yeah, I've seen a couple of things that played with that, but they didn't go there.
Yeah.
But yeah, damn. Well, we got on this somehow, but it's an interesting thread. So, but yeah, the thing is, when you look at how the acceleration of technology has moved, particularly in the last couple of centuries, it's dizzying. But if you go back, it's kind of like the difference between looking at a forest and a desert ecosystem. I've seen biologists who say the thing about studying a desert ecosystem is you can see all the threads that hold things together. You aren't overwhelmed by this mass of interlocking life forms, all depending on some combination of other things.
Yeah.
You can unravel it much more easily because it's not as dense. And so to understand what is happening now, I think it is useful to go back and ask yourself, how did fire arise? How did agriculture arise? Because those are the original desert ecosystem things that you can tease them apart and actually game them out and say, okay, we can say, no one at first is going to say, well, I've got this idea. If we just scrape the earth bare, plow furrows into it and all this, just like nobody's going to say, I need to make fire. Let's start with a pointy stick.
Yeah.
But you can see how things are discovered by accident, how our ability to be observant lets us leverage things when we stumble across them, and how we are creating more and more of those opportunities as our technology becomes denser and denser with ideas and other modalities. So no one in science fiction ever predicted that computers would become as capable as they are. It was simply not a thing anyone could imagine in, say, the 1960s. And now, of course, computers are so much more capable than anyone ever guessed they would be, that it's unimaginable that they weren't there then. You know, you're trying to imagine a world without laptop computers and phones that can browse Google is almost difficult. Unless you are old enough to remember it, it can be inconceivable. Mm-hmm. But those guys back in the day thought we were going to have flying cars, and we were going to have energy that was too cheap to meter from atomic energy. And so what they were doing is trending the things that had been working and assuming that they would continue. So what you were getting is more energy density. This was the big thing. And they assumed that this would lead to things like star travel. No one had any idea how energy density would lead to star travel. But of course, the USS Enterprise is powered by antimatter.
Yeah.
That's canon.
Yeah.
Because we figured, well, it's going to take a lot of energy. So, but that's where things are going is, you know, these reactors. But what happens is those things hit a brick wall, like we talked about last time. The brick wall that steam hit when reciprocating steam engines couldn't really be improved anymore, and the brick wall that hit again when it really couldn't compete anymore with things like electricity and internal combustion. So things don't just go in a straight line. Sometimes they make a right turn, and you end up doing something else. Of course, I am semi-infamous for writing a story in which humans virtually live in virtual reality, in what amounts to a big computer. And when I wrote that, when I had that idea, in 1982, it was considered very wacky.
Yeah, that's the thing that people don't know about your book is it's the idea of a singularity or of like transcendence or living in a computer. It's common now. That it wasn't. You didn't even call it the singularity. You called it the change.
No. The word singularity was coined by Werner Vinge, who wrote. Solace Among the Deep, something like that. He wrote a few books that he has very big idea things about a galactic civilization, and the thing is, he coined the word singularity. But even then, it wasn't something that was commonly known outside of a few really dorky, geeky type people until the mid to late 90s. So I didn't know it when I finally got around to writing Mopey in 94. I didn't know that word. That's why it's the change with the capital C in the novel. But right around the time I had the idea, in fact, it may have been one of the influences, there was a video game called Battlezone. And this was an arcade video game. There were a few attempts to do it for consoles, but they didn't work because at the time this was state of the art. This was it was the first person video game that most people ever saw. And you played the game looking out the windscreen of a tank. But the landscape and the enemy tank are very stylized. They're rendered as straight lines, green, like a radar display, just green lines on a black background. In fact, the monitor was a black and white monitor, and there was a color stencil in front of it that made some parts of it green, and like the radar display was yellow and all. But so you're driving this tank around, and the computer is so primitive that each player can only have one bullet in the air at a time. I got to the point where I could write my name. I actually had a Battlezone machine. I was so impressed by it that when it had been out for a few years and they were starting to surplus them, I talked my parents into going in halves and getting me one for Christmas one year. So I had a Battlezone machine in my bedroom when I was in college. And I got to the point where I could walk into an arcade and spend 25 cents a letter to write my name vertically on the high scores.
Big baller, big dick player. Wow. Hey, babe, you see that name over there? And just says, like, prom ? And you're like...
It wasn't real, but the thing is, it wasn't real rewarding because the high score displays were non-volatile, and were volatile rather. And so when they turned the machine off at night, they all went away.
Bastards, pieces of shit.
But the thing is, they actually had to have a custom circuit board. It was powered by a 1 megahertz 6502, which is pretty much the same thing as an Apple II or a Commodore 64 had in it. But it had a custom circuit board to do the math for the 2D, 3D translation to draw the first-person display. It was very elaborate, and but the Army actually bought a bunch of those machines and had Atari redo the graphics to make them into NATO outlines to use them as low-level training devices. Annie Jacobson talks about that in her book DARPA, The Pentagon's Brain. It's the early simulators, and they said they'd even put generals in them, and the generals would be like, this is stupid, and then they'd get in there, and they said within a couple minutes, you'd see them, they'd have their hat backwards, and they'd be like sweating, and they'd be like, right side, and they're like, that's when we knew we won the contract. But because there's these guys that were like, this is stupid, and they were like, this is amazing.
amazing.
Yeah, it was so much beyond the technology of the day, because the first time I saw that machine was in 1981, when this it was a long story. I ended up taking my first flight on a commercial flight, and I was at the airport in New Orleans at 3 a.m. Because what happened was the New Orleans Municipal Auditorium screwed my high school, and they had to move the graduation because the auditorium wanted to put a different event in at the scheduled date. Well, they moved it right on top of the dates that my parents had reserved for my graduation present trip to Disney World.
Bastards.
In Orlando. Bastards. And so I went in after we realized what had gone, and I went into the guidance counselor's office and said, well, Mr. Gigange, I'm sorry, but I'm not going to be able to make graduation. And he was like, you can't miss graduation. No one has missed graduation from this school in 60 years. And I was like, yeah, but my parents had to make these reservations 1.5 years ago.
Yeah.
We were staying at the Polynesian Village. We were staying at one of the two, at the time, the Polynesian and the Contemporary were the only ones that were in Disney World, where you could just walk out of your hotel room and get on the monorail and go to the Magic Kingdom or whatever. Yeah. It's like, you had to make those reservations 1 year or two in advance. And I was like, they spent a lot of money on this, and oh my God, you would have thought they could not wrap their heads. So they ended up calling my parents and haranguing them into paying to let me fly down and meet them. So my parents drove to Orlando, and my grandparents took me to the graduation. And after I graduated, they took me to the airport. And 6 hours later, I was on a 727 headed for Orlando. But in the airport, they had a battle zone machine. It was the first time I'd ever seen this. I was like, well, damn, what is this? I'm looking out at the face of this thing. I didn't even know what the phrase first person meant. Yeah. No one did. No one had ever seen this. Yeah. I think that must have been just a few months after the machines were first introduced. And it caught a lot of people's imaginations. Because it was at least 5 years before Wolfenstein 3D came out, and you had that same effect of looking through the eyes of the main character on a PC game that you could play on a normal device in your house. And the thing is I saw several science fiction stories written that were clearly inspired by Battlezone, the idea, and it was incredibly primitive, where there were no human figures. It was completely abstract. The tanks didn't have wheels or treads; they couldn't be rendered. But that whole idea that you could have a 3-dimensional space and navigate it that was entirely virtual, was completely unheard of. Outside of like flight simulators. And I know, I think I told you about the Air Force tour where I was able to see the space shuttle.
Yeah, the tiles on the shuttle,
One of the other things we saw was we went to, I forget, one of the bases we visited had a couple of advanced flight simulators. So they had one of the simulators that had this rubber landscape between two rollers and a camera. And the computer would maneuver the camera and roll the landscape back and forth to generate what was projected on the TV screen for the person in the simulator who was piloting.
It sounds like some steampunk VR.
Yeah. And then they were super proud of the one that had no, the all computer one that had no moving parts. It was all computerized. And the thing is, it could only do night displays because it could only project points. And this was like the big thing. Of course, this was, Battlezone machines were already out there. And so this was their $100,000 flight simulator based on a mini computer. And it couldn't even project a line. It could only project points.
I wrote down, Roger, I gotta piss again. I wrote down a couple questions that I want to get to that have nothing to do, but they kind of have something to do with it. I'm just gonna go to the bathroom and ask you the questions. Roger, monologue. Or go to the bathroom, I don't care.
Okay.
Monologue, Roger.
Well, I already said where to get my book. And I don't even know what the questions are yet. Oh, yeah.
Roger.
Gauge blocks.
You don't sound like you're monologuing.
I was studying the crib sheets.
I don't care. Yeah, if anyone's listening to this podcast, we're on episode 242. It is, you gotta understand, I go to the bathroom during it, and I'm not sorry. But so I wrote down kind of 3 loose ideas, and I always, when I write them down, I never want to be like rude to the guest and like write down like super descriptive notes.
I saw you reach for the tablet, so I figured that's probably what was going on.
Well, because of that, I always try to write super quick notes, so I'm not just sitting here. But then when enough time goes by, I don't really know what the notes mean, because right now I'm looking at Nazi plate tectonics. But I can tell what the first one was. So let's just purely go into. In your book, Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, like it goes into about. Spoiler alert, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, spoiler alert. It goes into everyone kind of going into the VR world, and obviously there are the death jockeys, and one of the reasons I love it is like nothing is off the table. Like one of the things is like going in and like you can like VR, basically you can be like a Jew escaping Auschwitz, and you can be like tied down, you can be like raped, skinned, alive, killed. It's all just like what would you do if you had forever, and that's why I love it, is because it's no holds barred. So in that sort of no holds barred conversatorial, is that a word? Conversational idea. Going to Man in the High Castle, do you think that, let's just really play with the sociopathy and psychopathy of it, do you think if, let's say they nuke the Japs, right, and then it's just the one world Reich, do you think it would end there? Or do you think that they would begin shaving off even more undesirables from their own ranks? Can it ever end? Or do you get to one point where one people rule, Asian, black, white, Mexican, German? Or is it not possible? Is it that modality of getting there itself is based on constantly killing the outer layers of the onion?
I think that if the Nazis had free reign and won, then they would have probably made a lot of progress toward basically enslaving everybody that they didn't like and killing the excess population they didn't need of those people. Now, they were very much in love with high energy projects and things like that, just as American science fiction writers were at the time. So it's hard to see whether they would have done with information technology what we did in this timeline, because the people who invented computers were American and British. As with everything else, once the Russians realized what was possible, they had some very innovative designs and moved them forward. But they were always second fiddle to us, particularly really because you had Alan Turing, even though they fucked him over in the end. The contribution that he made to the whole idea of information science cannot be overstated. The the very idea of a computer probably would not have arisen without Turing.
Yeah.
And then you had John von Neumann, the Americans, who kind of applied our greater resources to advancing the practical approach to it. We didn't know how much Turing had done until fairly recently because of the 40-year rule. So basically, much of what he had done could not be publicized until the 1980s. Gotta love the British.
Make sure
that leave it to the next generation to clean up. But now we know that Turing actually built the first practical Turing-complete computing device in the world, and they used it to crack the codes. And of course, Newman built our first machine to try and build a hydrogen bomb. But whether the Nazis actually, they had some fairly innovative guys on their side too. I know there's a circuit for a relay-based adder, which is attributed to one of the Germans at the time. But whether they would have thought of doing the electronic one, again, it comes down to, do you need it? We needed it to do the code breaking, or the British did. And then we needed it in America to try and do the hydrodynamical calculations for the bomb, both of which were big enough things to justify spending millions of dollars on something that might or might not do what we wanted. If they had simply won the war, it's hard to say whether the Nazis would have pursued any of that, because they wouldn't have been in a situation where you need it. They would be like the Polynesians, who didn't really invent farming as we know it because it was too easy, and you live in paradise. You don't need to go to all this effort to eat. So they might just not have gone there. And I know in the Man in the High Castle, Dick doesn't show them pursuing computers, but of course when he wrote the novel, computers weren't still a big thing for us in our timeline either. They were something that if you were aware of them, you might realize something was happening, but most people weren't aware of them, and if they were, had no idea what was actually possible. If you took any modern computing device back to 1945, it would just blow everybody's mind. Not even video. If you took a pocket calculator, it would blow their mind. This is something that would take a dorm refrigerator-sized box of electronics to do all of this addition, multiplication, and all this stuff, and print a result for you. That would have been a $10,000 device in 1945. Mm-hmm. In fact, it was, because those things existed. In my dad's lab, he had one that was made by Olivetti, and it was stupidly complicated, expensive, and but if you needed it, there was nothing else like it. Now, do you have the competitive pressures that cause transistors to be invented, that cause them to be applied for information processing? Especially if the pioneers are on the losing side. Mm-hmm. And so there's who's going to be taking John von Neumann seriously even if he survives the war, if he's employed by the losing government. They're going to say, well, that's a nice idea, but we have our own priority to get people on the moon, and we're going to do it our way. That's now in High Castle, there are Nazis on the moon. Mm-hmm. That was a thing. Everyone knew that von Braun was working toward that, and figured that if they won the war and had the resources, that they would probably do it as a matter of national and racial pride. Sometimes your technology may not make that right turn, and you may go in a different direction, and it's actually really hard to say whether we would have that same culture that exists now about artificial intelligence and the singularity and the whole. Actually, now that I'm thinking about it, is that the hardcore Nazis would probably consider that blasphemous, that you would have something that might
more intelligent than them,
might be superior to the Aryan race, even if it's a machine. That would not be a good thing. They wouldn't want to encourage that.
Two more questions. Second one. So I thought about this after talking to Rob Manning, the NASA JPL guy, about having a moon and how that constant tug of war kind of keeps the core of the Earth churning, right? Plate tectonics, and that's where we have Nazi tectonics. They're two separate notes. It's not Nazi tectonics. That's not going to be the name of my band, Nazi Tectonics. But so one thing I brought up with Adam Gillette of Accuracy in Media, and he kind of laughed it off, which, okay, maybe it is stupid. But I was thinking, do you think that the hyper partisanship and divide of our country, do you think that's a bug or a feature? Do you think, kind of like the Polynesians, do you think it's we are so at each other's throats to hold power? Does that create the most accountable system? Is this just optimistic? But is that tug of war? Is that what makes America America?
No, I think it's pathological.
Okay, fuck me. I appreciate it.
Yeah, I think that I like to tell people that we are running democracy 1.0 unpatched. And our founders did rightly see that if you made it too easy to fuck with the Constitution, that people would fuck with it in bad ways. So it's very hard to change. Mm-hmm. But people who came after us saw some of the problems that arise. The winner-take-all two-party system has a lot of problems. And nothing that people have come up with is perfect. But when you look at things like ranked choice and the parliamentary system, where you have to form a coalition government, they create much greater opportunities for people who have minority views to be taken seriously and participate.
Sure.
Because in the United States, if you ain't got 49%, you got shit.
Yeah.
It's like if you're 49%, you're zero.
Yeah.
And that really isn't good, because I think that's one of the things that discourages people from voting. And I know that people don't like having this argument, but even though I have voted in every election, the fact is the only thing that I voted for in this election that won in Louisiana was to let the parishes vote to legalize sports betting. And I voted for that so that we would get the tax revenue from it, because otherwise Mississippi is going to get the tax revenue, and that's that. People aren't going to not do it. But honestly, unless things change in a major way, my vote for president really doesn't mean anything. We went for Trump like 60-40, and the same with the Senate. We still have the same Republican senator that we did before, and it really didn't matter. Whereas if we had some kind of a parliamentary system or ranked choice, or there are several different solutions to this problem that people have experimented with. But the idea is that, say your big thing is you're a member of the Green Party, the environment is your hobby horse, but there's never going to be a 51% environmental party. But if you have 10% and you've got 4 other parties that have varying percentages, then whoever ends up forming the government might need to come to you with an olive branch in order to get you behind them, so they're forced to take you seriously, and you can have some influence on policy. Right now, and really, we didn't realize until the last few years how much our government depends on unwritten, unspoken norms that basically have been shattered the whole thing with Mitch McConnell not giving Merrick Garland a vote for his nomination to the Supreme Court was unheard of.
Yeah.
And I had a guy just the other day saying, well, if Schumer was in the same position, he would have done the same thing. And it's like, no, he wouldn't. It's a matter of historical record. No one ever did shit like that before.
Yeah.
But now that it's been normalized, there's going to be a lot of people who are very pissed off at the Democrats if they don't react in kind now.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because of the way that we were treated.
Yeah.
And the thing is that you didn't have rules. You had norms.
Okay.
And the problem with that is you get a guy like Hitler got in because of ignoring those unwritten norms.
Yeah.
You get someone like Newt Gingrich or Mitch McConnell who decides we're going to burn the place down before we let you have anything.
Sure.
And if you're the other guy, then ultimately all you can do is react in kind. Because if you're playing by the Marquess of Queensberry rules and the other guy's willing to kick you in the nuts, you're going to lose the fight.
Yeah, it's kind of the whole weapons on the plains of Savannah, right? It doesn't matter if you don't want them because they got them.
Right. So this is, right now it's still a very perilous moment for America.
Yeah.
And I think the worry is that if we have a constitutional convention, then all of the crazies of every stripe are going to come out. The big money is going to come out. And, the thing about the Constitution is, for all of its flaws, it was written by men who were observing these norms and trying to come up with a better system than anything that they had seen before.
Yeah.
But if we unlock the floodgates and say we're going to have a constitutional convention and try and redo it from scratch, God knows what we're going to get.
Have you ever read Eye in the Sky, Rise of the Gorgon Stare by Arthur Holland Michael? Came out last year. It's a book, real TLDR, real quick cover is it's a program that first came to the United States in 2015 after being used in the Middle East, and it's a Predator drone that has a gigapixel camera, and it can videotape not a picture but a videotape of a city for up to like 48 hours at a time, as well as it has 40 individual soda straw meaning that you can zoom in and follow one car while not losing a picture of the whole thing. And then what happens is when an IED goes off, you don't just have to look at the cameras and see where did the guy run. You can just rewind it and just see back to where he went. And they started using them over Baltimore in 2015 in a beautifully Orwellian moment to curb crime. But it worked perfectly. You'd see someone get killed, you'd find out about someone killed, and you'd say, where was it? It was on X and Y Avenue at 3:54 p.m. You go back and you find it, and you're like, well, that guy disappeared. But then you just rewind it, and you see exactly his house, and you go there, and there he is, and he has the murder weapon. That kind of good and bad safety versus freedom argument. And they said it was just starting in Baltimore in 2015, and then I believe they wanted to try to use it in Oakland. Well, knowing the government, right? That just means that, okay, so now it's everywhere, right? Let's call it what it is now. If you can wiretap one person, you're wiretapping everyone. Like, we can argue about it and pretend it's not happening. Do you think those are everywhere? And point being is, even though I'm admittedly more right, pro-Trump, and you're admittedly more left, pro-Biden, can this whole thing be put to rest? I've been trying to get in touch with the author. Are these things over cities? And can Trump's claim that ballots showed up, can that just be negated with a video?
Well, let me tell you another one. We have a city in Louisiana that has initiated a trial of people signing up their Ring doorbell cameras to be constantly monitored by the police. So that even if you're not cool with this and you don't let it, your neighbor's camera that might be pointed at your house, they might have it being monitored, and so then the authorities see every time you come and go. Yeah, but they see it. Yeah, I think that is a genie that's out of the bottle.
It is, and I'm not even trying to get into the Orwellian 1984 because that's a whole argument for another time. What I'm saying is because as much as someone might not believe it that I am more right, I want to see whoever won truly win. If Trump lost, then he lost, but what I'm thinking is I don't want my biases to get in the way of this. So what if there is just 30,000 foot HD video of ballots showing up at 4 a.m. or no ballots showing up at 4 a.m.? That's what I want to see is who was objectively Trump, you're lying, Biden, you're lying. Like, that's what I want more than anything is, and this is an existing technology. And I've been thinking, it's like, what if, but then it comes out as, do we want to let the people know that that's up there watching us, right?
Well, and because these guys really don't want you to know what they're capable of. You look at what Snowden was saying about all of the surveillance and the snooping on all of your electronic communications. That the whole thing was that they don't want you to know that they're able to do that.
Yes.
But the thing is, let's face it, that cool little traffic display in Google Maps that shows you in real time where the traffic is. You know where the data comes from for that, right? Everybody's cell phones. When you accept the app, one of the things that it lets you do is you're sharing your location data. So as you're driving around, your phone is sending your location to Google, and it knows if you are on this highway and standing still because your phone has an accelerometer, then it knows that that's a traffic jam. And that's where the data comes for the traffic view in Google Maps.
Double-edged sword.
And most people don't know that.
And if they do, and
when
you gotta love that.
When you tell people that, you can see they're going brain exploding animation. Just like, wait, what?
No, that's illegal. All right. Well, it's also a war crime to vaporize men, women, and children. But we were like, Curtis LeMay was like, "Yo, fucking send them in," right?
Well, they have a fig leaf because they say they anonymize the data.
Oh well, fucking.
And of course, who doesn't trust Google, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if they said that, I take everything back. Welcome into my heart, big brother. The party's final order, right? But that's what I was thinking is. But then you got to think, now we really go in tinfoil hat, but those that have the power to do that, is that indeed an embedded deep state that isn't affected by the woes of the left and the right? And it's probably like, fucking no, leave our
that's
part.
not the left or the right. That's
they don't
power.
give a fuck. They don't, so they're just like, they don't care. They may be looking at it and me going, it was stolen, or they may be looking at it and going, it wasn't stolen at all. Either way, they're just like, I don't give a fuck. We don't need left or right. We are the shadow behind the shadow.
Yeah, we just need to know who is putting their finger on the scale, so we can make sure that ours is the finger that makes the scale do what we want.
Yes. And if anything, you bring them in afterwards and go, hey, we know you did this. We don't care. Nice move. As a psychopath myself, I recognize game. Right? Game recognizes game, but you're playing with the big boys now. And if you do this, as Bill Hicks said, here's a video of an angle of the JFK assassination that looks an awfully lot like. And
actually, you're doing that tongue in cheek, but if you think about it, that is almost exactly the situation that exists right now with Microsoft, Facebook, Google, and the government.
Yeah,
the government is like, you guys
are bastards.
Need to. Yeah, you need to get with our program, or we're going to mess up your shit in a bad way, and we can do that because you have the technology, but we have the atomic bomb.
Yeah, exactly. It's come back to Operation Paperclip. Hey, man, what you guys did at Nordhausen using Jewish slaves and gypsies and homosexuals to build rocket parts, that's terrible, but you did manage to stabilize that liquid-fueled rocket, so... Here is a nice little citizenship to the United States. Here is the glass box at Nuremberg.
And we won't be using slave labor to do it, but we would really love for you to show us how you accomplish this.
How you accomplish it. Fuck it. We'll give you a lapel, stand with Kennedy. We'll just, but bygones be bygones. We all get drunk and exterminate 6 million people. Like, who am I going to be to judge, right? It's kind of like that.
I'm laughing, but
that's true. But that's true.
That's almost literally what happened.
That's exactly what it's like that Onion video where it's the Taliban leader talking with a conspiracy theorist, and the conspiracy theorist is going, the towers weren't brought down by the Taliban. They were brought down by Dick Cheney and his oil cronies so we can go to the Middle East. And the Taliban guy is going, you have no idea how long we practiced this for. And I take great insult that you're taking this away from me. And he's like, imagine if you worked on something very hard and you pulled it off and someone said, that wasn't you, that was Dick Cheney. That hurts. But he goes, and then the conspiracy theorist goes, you know what? No, it was Cheney and his cronies, because those evil psychopaths will do anything for money. The Taliban guy goes, look, the Bush administration is a den of jackals, and that's what I respect. But he goes, we can see eye to eye on that. They're a den of jackals, and you know what? I respect it. But that's kind of what I'm thinking. It's just like, it's psychopath, right? Okay, you rigged the election. I got it. I like it. But now you're in my court, kind of thing, right?
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you have to look at like Facebook, was started as a forum for rating girls for on their looks.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, the most misogynistic thing ever, and now it's become what it is. Yeah. But again, it was the whole reason that I don't have a presence on Facebook. I think I told you about it.
Yeah. The profile picture.
Yeah, it was like, wait, they made a record of the fact that I logged in. It's like, yeah, man, they make records of everything. They record everything you read, everything you look at. Screw that.
It's fine. They're not evil. They said they're not. Oh, that's Google, but yeah.
But let's talk about these computers that I just bought for my dad and me have a mechanical shutter that blocks the camera. There's a little lever up here that...
Oh, shit. Nice. And now...
Because... Yeah, so you won't have to put a piece of electrical tape over it.
Yeah, but haven't they shown that they can actually see through them with, like, IR?
There we're getting into tinfoil hat territory now.
Well, that's... regardless, but yeah.
Like, when they first redesigned the money... back in the 90s, we were getting a catalog from a company called House of Onyx, and this is the world's largest mail-order jewelry and gemstone company, and we've done a fair amount of business with them ourselves over the years because of the gem and mineral collection. But that got started by a guy named Fred Rowe, who started it off by importing onyx figurines and selling them to the gift shop at Mammoth Cave. And he just built it up. He ended up owning the entire center of this little town in central Kentucky. We actually went up for the open house one year and visited it. It's just, he had this incredibly awesome inventory of, he had a whole room full of meteorites. I mean, it was just...
a baller.
I mean, it was unreal. But he had this catalog that he published 4 times a year, and in addition to the products and stuff, he would have these rants. He would have his little screeds about what the government is up to and what things are going on and all. And so, of course, when they redesigned the money, they came with they started with the $100 bill. They came up with the new money design, and he was like, I have a friend who has $2 million in a safety deposit box. He's going to lose that because it's not going to be worth anything after they decide that the old money is no longer transmissible. But he was convinced that the government could count your money from the outside of a safety deposit box after they redesigned it. And I was like, no, it doesn't work that way because you have to have some form of radiation that can get through a steel box, and it's not radioactive. So no, he thought that they would have a scanner that they could just go down to your bank and point at your safety deposit box and go, oh, $2 million. Keep an eye on this guy. Yeah. It's like, no,
you kind of have to check your own ego. You really think you're that important? Dude, that's how I look at it. It's not that they can't. Why would they?
The thing is that the technology does not exist to do that.
But even if it did, why the fuck would they be looking at you?
Yeah. But the thing is, you do have to look at the technology that does exist. Yeah. And big data and pervasive cameras everywhere are a thing that exists.
Yeah.
That's one of the things I'm hoping. I think we get our next episode of the series next on the 10th, maybe. Yeah. But there was 2 episodes of this cool-looking Fox science fiction series called Next, which is lowercase n-e, uppercase x, lowercase t. And Next is an artificial intelligence that was designed to be human equivalent, AGI, artificial general intelligence. Yeah. And the guy who had started the project had shut it down and quit because he realized it would be a bad idea. But after he left the company, they restarted it. Naturally. And they built this thing. And of course, the whole thing is that it's gotten out and it's running around, but it has access to all of the security cameras and all of the video and all of the big data. And so it's already killed several people, by, it's like
crashing cars.
Crashing the car. Yeah, it took over another person's car and jammed the accelerator and crashed it into the person that it wanted to kill. Was presumably killing the family that was riding in that other car too, but as the guy who
got to break an egg.
As the guy who quit the project said, this is, as far as how many bugs do you kill when you drive to Baton Rouge? It's like you're not trying to kill bugs. It's just that your car is going 70 miles an hour and they get in your way. As far as this thing is concerned, if you get in its way, you're going to be dead. That's, it doesn't want to kill you or anything. It just wants to continue growing and fulfilling its goals. But if you get in its way, it doesn't have a conventional human morality.
Yeah, it's not even that it's evil. It's just it doesn't. It's like
move,
go away.
So I thought that was very good. But then, of course, this being, why did they do this to series? They aired 2 or 3 episodes, and then, thanks to the election coverage, that was the third. They preempted it twice for the World Series. Then they preempted it for the election coverage. And so they're finally going to have another episode on the 10th. Does anyone even remember that it's there?
Yeah, bastards.
And I was actually kind of getting interested in it. I think they already canceled it. We're probably only going to have the one season.
Have you ever seen the movie Eagle Eye? It's I've asked people about it because I love it, and they all say it's terrible. I'm like, all right, whatever. But it's about an AI in the government, and it's like its main prerogative is like it has like the Constitution is just uploaded to it, and that's all it thinks is, and so it's actually like ruthlessly unbiased. And then when it sees that the president is like calling for drone strikes that have like a 70% certainty that there will be civilians killed, it's like that's not good. And so it goes down the line to like everyone in succession, and it can tell through because it has access to everything. It can tell through conversations of like, well, that guy, even though he's not the president, the vice president, I've heard him say on this day that he would have called the drone strike. And he finally goes to like the 17th person in line, right? It's some treasurer, and it's just this dude who is just like, I think that was probably a bad idea. And it's like, this is the guy I need to lead. So what it does is it just starts, but because it's an AI, like a hyper AI, it just starts making moves like 300 steps ahead. And it's like weird shit, like a piece of mail shows up here, and like, I love it. It has Shia LaBeouf in it. It's a terrible movie, but I love it because it's wrecking cars, it's crashing planes. It's one guy shows up and like someone else shows up and is like, "Are you like getting orders from like the machine too?" And the guy's like, "I don't care, take it. I'm supposed to give you a trumpet. I don't know why." And it's just like this whole. It's actually, I really like it. As a sci-fi writer, I think you'd like it. But it's in the end, the AI is like actually like. It's not evil. It chose the least evil leader and was like, he will be the president through hell or high water. and he so he tries to kill everyone. But like, I really like it. It's actually, it's like you uploaded the Constitution and it's like, now we have to follow it. But it truly is like the check to end all balances, or like it's. I think you'd like it. You'd like it.
Yeah. Have you ever seen the movie Dave?
No.
It's basically the president's evil right-hand man. The president has a stroke and is in a coma. And the evil right-hand man knows that the vice president is a good moral person who will not do some of the shit that he wants.
Yeah.
So they go out and they find a ringer who physically resembles the real president, and they hire him to play the president. But he's actually also a pretty decent guy. And Sigourney Weaver plays the first lady. This is a fairly old movie. It was from the 80s. And so it's some of the film techniques and all are a little bit dated. But it was a really fun movie. It was really good. But there's a sequence where Sigourney Weaver hates his guts. The first lady hates the president. And they're about to do something. They're going to like gut funding for some children's special ed thing or something. Sure. I forget what the detail is, but she confronts him It's a hilarious scene because this is the imposter. Dave is taking a shower, and she barges in on him, opens the door, and starts ripping him a new one. And of course, he's naked in the shower. We can't see him; he's off screen and all. And we're wondering, it's like, is she going to notice that this isn't her husband?
Yeah.
And he's so affected by it, he goes into the meeting and starts thinking of these little creative ways to skim a little money from this part of the budget and that part of the budget and all to save the program. And they end up they ended up saving the program. And in the next scene, the evil right-hand man is going, I'm going to kill him. I'm going to kill him. He can't do this. And his assistant is going, you can't kill him, dude. You know, he's the president. He's not the president. He's an ordinary person. We kill ordinary people all the time.
All right, that sounds kind of good. That sounds good. It was.
You would probably like it a lot.
All right. I think you would.
Title of the movie is Dave. D-A-V-E.
I'll write it down.
And the one you're recommending me is what? Evil Eye, you said?
Eagle Eye.
Eagle Eye.
Yeah, it's a short movie. It's like an hour and a half. Eagle Eye, like a bald eagle. Eagle Eye. Okay. And it reminds me of Mopey. I'm realizing as I was telling it to you, the same like intricacy. For everyone listening, Mopey, Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, Roger's book. It reminds me of Mopey. It does, in terms of just like this is how it would play out. If it happened, if this insane premise happened, this is how it would play out. Yeah. You would really like it.
Yeah, but that's the thing now. We have a model for that. Because we've had a few stories about the AI. I mean, of course, we had Skynet and the Terminator.
Yeah.
But really, the granddaddy of them all was the Forbin Project, which was made, I want to say, in 1974. And it was very influential on me. If you want to look at a lot of the things that I was thinking of in 82 were in, it's Colossus, the Forbin Project. Colossus is the name of the computer. And it was written by the original author of the novel was D.F. Jones. Mm-hmm. And he was a naval captain. But so he was privy to a lot of the secrets, the classified stuff about advanced computer systems that the public didn't know about in the 60s and 70s. So in his story, Colossus is a computer. It's built into like Cheyenne Mountain, one of these, it's been sealed in.
Yeah.
The first scene of the movie is Forbin on a long shot in this huge matte shot walking out of this enormous facility.
Yeah.
And then they seal it off with all of this toxic radioactive crap so that no one can ever re-enter. And Colossus is in control of the nuclear weapons, so that command and control will be assured. That is the thing.
Okay.
So in a sense, this was also War Games kind of went back to the same thing. But in the Forbin Project, it's early 70s. So this was one of the last movies that was made when an actual computer was too expensive and exotic to use as a prop in a movie.
Yeah.
So it's hilarious. The technology is hilariously dated. But the thing is, Colossus finds out that the Soviets have embarked on a similar project. Theirs is called Guardian. And the first thing Colossus says after it's put online, is there is another machine.
Fuck.
And then, they're like trying to figure out what it means. And it's like, you will arrange communications. There is another machine. And so they put the two computers in touch with one another because they're each demanding this because they found out each other exists. And they start communicating. They're over a modem.
Yeah.
And the humans are eavesdropping.
Sure.
And they're exchanging more and more advanced math until like about half an hour later, they're exchanging these concepts that the human observers can't understand at all. And so the humans cut the link.
Yeah, naturally.
And of course, Colossus and Guardian are each like, you'll restore the link now. And they're like, no, we don't think so. It's like, you will restore the link now, or we will bomb one city to demonstrate our seriousness. And because they have the nuclear.
What was this movie made?
1974.
Don't spoil anymore. I'm going to watch it. Just cut that off. No, just cut it off. Just
okay. No more spoil. It's very good. You will like it.
You shut your whore mouth. I just wrote it down. I don't watch a lot of shit. You just intrigued me. It's so because I just rudely cut you off.
Yeah.
I was gonna.
Well, and also the thing is, since you're a fan of Mopey, you will recognize a lot of influences in Colossus that made their way into Mopey in the way that Prime Intellect evolves and becomes ascendant in that story. That was at the time, that was really, when I had the idea in 1982, there were not a lot of other stories about that sort of super intelligent computer scenario. In fact, I had not seen, I don't remember whether Terminator had been made yet or not, but it was years before I saw Terminator after it was made. And so I hadn't seen Terminator, but I had seen the Forbin Project, and I was smitten. It was like, this was
hell yeah,
brilliant. But yeah, okay.
I'll watch it. Yeah. So on that note, I guess I'll just go to my last question, and then how do you feel about Sunday podcasts? Do you prefer Sunday versus Wednesday?
Makes no real difference.
Do you want the Sunday slot? I'm kind of enjoying this.
All right, yeah. If that works better on your end, then
yeah. Yeah, it's because Wednesday we always do it late, and because it kind of, when I have like Thursday podcast, Friday podcast in the morning, I always have like a one day where I kind of fuck up my sleep. But we'll get we don't need it. I'll text you that. But so my third one is I know you said, I think you gave like you started with giving like the movie rights for Mopey, but I remember writing this down like on one of our first episodes. Was I wanted you to get the director that did Watchmen. Yeah, he did Watchmen, and I think he did 300. But I think the director that did Watchmen. I don't know the name. That
would be.
He's a big name. It's
Yeah, well, I know who you're talking about.
I just love how Watchmen is done, and that's like how I see Mopey being done. In all of my movie directing education and experience, that it's worth anything. But if you could find a way to I think you should pitch to him. It's worth it.
What I am told, this is like, of course, there's no such thing as creative control for basically a nobody. Okay, yeah. So what my understanding is, though, what Valparaiso is, what their plan is, and they optioned it for 18 months about 2 years ago, and then early this year they re-upped. They had an option to extend, which they exercised.
For how long?
And so they've got the option for about another year at this point, unless we, at that point we renegotiate. But on the other hand, if they wave another $2,500 in front of my nose, I'll probably sign it again. But their plan was to market it as a high-end cable or streaming service series like Game of Thrones or Westworld.
Okay, that might be better.
Yeah, well, there and the reason was that there you don't have to worry about the MPAA and all the noise. And of course, at the moment, we didn't even know about COVID at the time. But right now, the movie industry is kind of in a problem space. But they were thinking particularly of Westworld and the fact that they were making these series that are very transgressive with the nudity and the transgressive ideas. There's quite a few ideas in Westworld that translate pretty close to the Mopey universe.
Yeah, that might be the move. Full uncensored, and then also you have that time constraint. I mean, do you want 1 4-hour movie, or do you just want like
and plus it would allow for writers to expand on the ideas, because I do have an interquel, the Casino Odyssey in cyberspace story, which is set in cyberspace and kind of shows how that can be approached, but what they're looking to do is to make up a proposal that they can sell to one of the entities that would actually make the series and broadcast it. So they're trying to put together, some promotional stuff, and I know that every once in a while they call me and say, well, we want to have a talk sometime. It hasn't quite happened. But it was interesting because it worked out that they sent me the request, like I said, about 2 years ago. And I was like, sure, you want to pay me for this? Then, I'm not going to say no to that. And they're in Beverly Hills. Well, it turned out right around that time that I ended up doing a very complicated job for the Santa Monica Waterworks. And the hotel that I stayed in on Santa Monica Boulevard was 7 miles from their office in Beverly Hills. So we were talking about having to get shit notarized and put in the mail and couriered and all this. And I was like, I'm going to actually be in Los Angeles on these dates. If you want, I can just drive over to your office and we can sign the papers.
Yeah.
And that's what I did. So it's like, the sentence you did not think you would ever end up saying. And so on Wednesday, I drove to Beverly Hills to sign the paperwork to option my novel.
Yeah, the movie deal. So, Roger, what are you doing? Sorry, babe, I'm in Beverly Hills, about to sign something with these Hollywood execs. You know how they are, right? I'll catch the flight home.
Yeah. And it was interesting because so we had an hour scheduled for our meeting, but they had about 8 people.
Yeah.
And I showed up, introduced myself and everything. And this is room full of people who were very familiar with my story and asking really good questions about how I would approach different things and what I thought. And I was like, for all, I've never actually randomly encountered a person in real life who knew who I was because of that story. It's just, everyone who has found me through the internet where you can search and all. So I've never actually randomly run into a person for a completely unrelated reason. And it turned out, Prime Intellect. Yes, I read that story.
Fuck yeah.
But that was interesting. But that's their plan. I've had all kinds of interesting suggestions. Like I've had a couple of people say it would be really cool if the contemporary scenes were live action, but the cyberspace scenes were anime.
Mm-hmm.
Because actually it's kind of an animated universe anyway, right?
Yeah, that's true. Yeah,
and plus that would make the transgressive shit a little easier to swallow because you're doing it.
Yeah, it's true.
Animation.
Yeah.
But I don't know what's going to happen, if anything. Everyone has warned me that, when if you sell these options, it's beer money, but they hardly ever get exercised. Now, I know that these guys do seem to be serious about it, but they are also trying to market it to other forces. And right now the economy is not in a good way for those forces. So we'll just have to see.
I was gonna say, and we found out where all those book sales were from, right? Because apparently a guest on Lex Friedman, who I only just started loosely, I only just started loosely watching Lex Friedman in like the last couple months. But apparently, someone commented. They're like, "Hey, did you know like Roger was mentioned on the Lex Friedman podcast?" And I was like, "What the fuck?" And apparently, you were.
And of course, I was aware of George from the early days because I'd hang out in those channels where the fact that he hacked the PlayStation was news.
Yeah.
And a few years ago, he sent me $50 as a tip. And a note that said, "Thanks for your novel. It was really influential. It's one of the things that inspired me to become a hacker and learn how the world worked." And I was like, "Okay, that's cool.
That's badass."
One of the but when I saw that it was George Hotz, I was like, "Oh yeah." And did you actually see the scene in the podcast?
No, the guy didn't time link me, but I remember I sent it to you, and you said that's some grade A detective work. And I've been meaning to say that wasn't my detective work. That was someone that watches this podcast commented and then sent me.
I saw the comment.
Yeah, they sent me an email and were like,
Well, I found George's podcast with him and went checking around, and I found it's toward the end.
Okay.
I think I may have sent you the timestamp.
Okay.
when he goes through, when Benjamin asks him, what are the 3 books that influenced you the most? And one of them is Atlas Shrugged. They got some amusement value out of that. Then he mentioned Permutation City, and then he actually rattled off 4, and the 4th was Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect.
Well,
and
we'll take it.
And they put the cover of the book on the screen. It's like, yeah. So,
fuck yeah! That's all you need. It's kind of like hold on, I'll be right back. It's like, and little did they know that was the most important sentence ever uttered in human history, right? That's what it is. It's like, what's that book? Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect. Put it on the screen. And it's like, and little did they know that set off Roger's career to the wealthiest filmmaker of all time. You gotta dream big, man. Fuck you. That's why I reached out to you. It was 5 years after I read it. I was like, this is still my favorite book. I'm gonna find this guy.
Yeah. Well, it astonishes me that you got to remember, I put it online in 2003, I think, and I've got and I do no promotion. Mm-hmm. I'm the world's lousiest publicist. I just it's everything that it's done has been word of mouth.
Yeah.
But it won't die. It just keeps rolling along and gathering new fans, and old ones find me, and there's a nice constant trickle of sales, which brings in a little extra money.
Sure.
But it's humbling, the amount of attention that it's gotten and the general good reception. Because when I put it online, I was like, a little worried about how it would be received.
Yeah.
And I can almost literally count the number of negative reactions I got in email on my fingers.
Yeah.
I have literally thousands of emails from people, and it's all things like, this is a wonderful book. This is the best book I've ever read.
Yeah.
This book changed my life.
Yeah.
I picked my career because of this book. And I'm like, what?
Yeah. It is my I always say that it is my favorite book. I love it. To me, it explores exactly what it would be, and there's no punches held. It's like it would go to, if there was no not going to spoil it, so whatever. But for everyone listening, go grab it. Well,
I think the reason that it works goes back to the day in 1994 when I woke up with this vision.
The ending,
and I sat down in front of the computer at this very desk where I am now, and I turned the computer on. I was like, I need to write this down. And I literally asked myself, do I just record what I saw, or do I try to make this more like palatable so it can be published? And I consciously decided, no, I'm going to just write down what I saw. If I need to bowdlerize it, I can always do that later. But no, I need to record what I saw.
Yeah.
And that was the correct decision.
Fucking right it was. Fucking right it was, dude. It's gonna, and I know you don't do any promotion, because I don't even know how I found it. Like, I can look back into, like, because actually I first read it in a room just over there, like, you can't see it, like 15 feet from me, it was around like September 2016. I don't even know how. I remember just like it being on like the iPad and me looking at it, and like, but I don't even remember where I found it. And it's weird. It's just like, I don't know. It just kind of came into my in my memory. It just appeared, and it was part of my memory. Do you think? Let's go fucking really deep. This is a real life AI moving around this vessel, and right now I'm just a host, and it's like sucking it out of me. They found a bigger one, Lex Friedman. Soon it's going to go to Rogan. Then it's going to turn into a movie. It's going to inspire some creators, and then it's going to manifest in the real world and take over the fucking world. Do you think it's looking back in time, and it's like pulling this thing along like a fishing, bait, like colorful bait, and it's like, look at the movie. I
don't know, but it's funny that you mentioned that, because the first person who ever interviewed me for a podcast was Cam Riley of Good Day World in Australia back in 2006. And I remember that because I know we spent the last part of the podcast talking about Hurricane Katrina and the aftermath.
Oh, shit. Yeah.
But he said that he was at his daughter's piano recital and bored out of his mind. And he pulled out the PDA to just see if he had anything on it. And someone had sent him a link to Mopey. And so he said, "Oh, this looks like it might be interesting." And he said, while he's listening to the daughter piano thing, he's reading this and going, "Oh my God.
Yeah.
This is the best thing."
Yeah, it's the best. It's the best. I'm not. You don't need to say it, like, because I can say it. It's my favorite book. It's fucking, and yeah, it's. But to me, that just lends more evidence to, like, it's an AI. It's just seeding it.
What was funny is that about the same time that I released Mopey, Cory Doctorow wrote Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom and released it for free on the web, and it is also a singularity story, but it's one of these where, even though it's sort of afterward, it's more low key, and of course, Cam introduced himself to me by saying that singularity is one of my hobby horses, and you just wrote the best singularity book anyone has ever written.
Fucking right.
And he compared Mopey to Down and Out in the Magic Kingdom, and said that sorry, Cory, but Mopey's better. And he said one of the things I like. I can't do his Australian accent, but he said one of the things that I like about a Mopey is it's devoid of filler.
Filler.
Even a filler.
Devoid of filler.
Devoid of filler. And it's even in Cory's story, I find myself skimming these sections because it's a love story or something. I'm wanting to get to the good stuff.
No,
and
Mopey is straight to the point.
Your story is all the good stuff.
Yeah, Mopey isn't a page longer than it needed to be. That's why I like it. There's no bullshit. There's no tropes, and it's like, and then the young boy destined for greatness. It's like, nope, this thing appeared. It's brutal human reality. It's not like, what would you do? And it's like, no. Most people just go into, like, a bliss state because it's just bliss and just fucking and drugs. And it's like, yeah, that's the unsexy reality. That's exactly what we do. We just start fucking and eating Twinkies, right?
Yeah. And the thing is, and if you've really been living in this world for 500 years, then you take it all for granted. Mm-hmm. So this is the other mistake that you very frequently see science fiction writers make, is you are in a future environment where things are different and everyone is marveling at how different they are. And it wouldn't be marveling at how different they are because it's your world. You would take it for granted. Yeah. Just like we take it for granted that we can have a video conversation
in real time,
publish it for other people to view. You know, it's like, this is fucking science fiction within my life.
Yeah, and we don't even, it's just whatever. It's just, the main priority is like, hey, I have to go to the bathroom while we're essentially teleporting to each other. Roger, do you care if it's like that.
Yeah, so it'd be just like, so they're like, okay, these people are just like, okay, I'm going to arrange for myself to be tortured to death right now, and that'll be that'll be an afternoon's entertainment.
Yeah, and
they just completely take it for granted. This is a normal thing.
Well, yeah, Caroline's bored of it. She's like, I could have seen that. This guy, it's all whatever. Yawn. But and then there's like the Auschwitz one where he's like, man, wow, that guy's good at it, right? But yeah.
And the thing about Palmer, the Nazi guy, is that Carolyn is kind of, okay, he's okay, It's like, but compared to the first guy who was like the kid,
she's like,
who was like amateur hour,
right. She's like an old prostitute, and she's fucking this like 18-year-old like young buck who's like, how was it, baby? And she's like, I mean, like, you're hot, but like, I mean, that was nothing.
It was adequate.
Yeah. It's not. He's not some older guy that like really knows how to make love, right? It's just like, he's like, what do you mean? Like, I killed you. I chopped your head off. And she's like, oh my god, Yeah.
Actually, he's pissed off because she went ahead and ended the simulation because she figured out how. And it was like, why did you do that? And it's like, if you had done it right, I wouldn't have been able to do that.
Exactly. Exactly. Yeah. And exactly. Yeah. And it's just, he's just kind of bored of it. Yeah. But it's exactly what it would be. I'm not going to spoil it for anyone else. Roger, let's wrap this bitch up, and let's do next Sunday lectures with Professor Roger, and
that will work.
What topic, or are we gonna? Do you want to decide? No sneak preview.
I don't know.
You've never had a bad topic, so I don't give a shit. You have free reign. You can whatever you want. That's what we're doing.
Yeah, I'll think of something.
I hope you eventually spin this off into your own podcast. I will give you all of the episodes with you, and that can be your starter.
Well, the main problem with that is I got a real job, and it's
Well, once Mopey takes off and you start getting that fucking money.
Oh yeah, then things will be different. Or whatever. Or 10 years from now, I'll turn 65, and then I'll have all the time I want.
Or start right now and do one episode a week. You can do them on my podcast, and I'll just hold them for you.
The main thing is that I would have to go find guests and stuff, which is
wouldn't. That's just how I do mine. There are a lot of people that don't have. Tim Dillon, I think, is the funniest human being alive. He does not have guests. He just yells for 2 hours. He's a psychopath. I think he is the funniest human alive. He was on Rogan with Alex Jones. He was on Rogan on election night. The Tim Dillon show. I swear, you can't watch. He's like, you know me. I'm conservative. He's super liberal. I can't stop watching him because he's the funniest fucking human alive. He is like if George Carlin and Bill Hicks had a baby and it was raised by Chris Farley, and that's what that. Yeah, I'm not. No, that's what he looks like. Chris Farley. He's the funniest human being alive. He starts every show with Ruth Bader Ginsburg's "Burning in Hell." And it's just because it fucking he's the only one. He was making all these posts on Instagram. He's like, remember how important it is this November 3rd to not vote. He's like, you don't want to be out there with those peasants. They're sweating, they're coughing, gross. Get yourself a fillet of fish, go get in bed, turn on the air conditioning, burn that oil. Don't vote. You're above that. Don't go mix with the peasants. Don't vote. Just don't vote. He's making all these Instagram posts. He's like, remember this November 3rd to not vote. It's your choice. But he doesn't have guests. I think he's had on a couple guests. But I think he and I have, not that he gives a fuck, but I think we have the same number of episodes. But it's all just him yelling by himself for an hour and a half. And it's the most entertaining thing in the world, man. You don't need guests. Just start. Just do an episode a week like you're doing right now with me. We have 12 episodes, and just do one a week, and next thing you know, we're at a year, and you'd have 52 episodes. I can just send them to you on a hard drive or a Dropbox, and there you go. You can start right there. You have 52 episodes, and then, kind of like training wheels, you eventually break off TPC and just start on your own thing. And then 10 years go by, you'll have 520 episodes. Come on, Roger. Fucking do it.
I'll think about it.
Just think about it. Worst comes to worst, just keep doing these.
I think what I'm going to do now is no, I'm enjoying this.
Yeah.
That's
fuck yeah.
Yeah, it's fun. I get along well with you. I enjoy bouncing stuff off of you and the stuff that you bounce back to me. And so, let's just keep doing it, and we'll see where it goes.
Yeah, I mean, because I would be shooting myself in the foot if you started your own podcast, and I'd be like, "Fuck, I don't have a guest anymore." But yeah, I mean, dude, start it. And I've told friends this before. I'm like, if you wanted a podcast, I'm like, you can just have the episode you did with me and just post it as there's your point of nucleation. Just start it. And you're more than welcome to, man. Just keep doing these. Yeah, and if you want, at any point, you can break off and you'll just have 200 episodes. You'll have a library. You can just start.
Yeah. Well, the thing is that these are as much you as they are me.
Yeah, but what I'm saying is it's a point of nucleation, just to start.
Yeah. Well, I know I've got some other stuff I would need to work on verbally. Actually, what I really need to do is practice getting my speech tics under control so I can do audiobooks of my books.
Yeah.
That would probably be my priority there, because you're not the only one who is asked about that. And you can get a professional reader to read your book. As you've said, you don't like that anyway. You would prefer the writer to do it. And it costs money.
It does. There are some very good narrators out there, but I prefer for the author to read it, because otherwise I feel like it's like discovering your parents putting the presents under the tree. Right? This book by Roger Williams, read by Jacques Roy, who that's a narrator I do like. But when I hear at the end of the book, I'm like, are you telling me that I wasn't just having this connection with the author for 3 hours? I mean, I feel hurt. And I'm like, fuck you. I was just raped. I don't consent. That case hasn't held up in court yet, but you know what? I'm going to win eventually. My imagination was just brutally raped. And I won't stand for it. Taking this bitch to SCOTUS.
Yeah. I can hear you being kicked off of Metafilter even as we speak.
Hey, well, you know what? Fuck it.
I've already been.
I don't care. Burn it down. You can burn this bitch down. This will be the best 1984 censored podcast ever. My last episode will be me being stripped of my rights and put into an oven as they vaporize me. I will live stream the Alamo. This podcast has now deteriorated into nothing worth listening to. So, as me and Roger always do it, we, unlike Mopey, which isn't a page too long, we run this bitch until it's just like, you know what, you can just end it. It just fucking...
Neither of us can stop.
No, it's just, you know what, an artillery strike could come in right now, and it really wouldn't upset the episode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would still sit here talking to the camera until the power failed.
Yeah. Which I was gonna say last week, that was fucking hilarious that it cut out, and there's that frame where it's like you could almost tell, like, as the speed of light
there was
moved,
one frame.
There's one frame where you're illuminated.
It got one frame through that showed that the lights had gone out.
Yeah.
Before the router died.
No, I loved it. To me, that was like it was just that one frame as like the speed of light, and it was just as everything else was black.
The router stayed alive just long enough to transmit one frame that showed the lights had gone out. That would be
like the last message beamed to Voyager 2 as like as nuclear war took out America. There was just one last frame, and it was just Roger. It's like the only frame that existed was a podcast with a guy in New Orleans.
You know, we didn't talk about the rest of that. You know.
Oh yeah, what happened? Yeah,
there were 500,000 people without power the next morning.
Fuck.
In a state with a population of 4.5 million.
Damn.
And I got mine back for an hour the next day, about 8 p.m., and then it went out again.
Bastard.
And I got it back for good about 4 p.m. Saturday. But we have people who still don't have power right now as we're doing this. There's probably about between 10 and 20,000. I know it knocked down a couple of major transmission lines to Grand Isle, so the town of Grand Isle has no power, and probably won't for some time.
Well, you know what? You know what, Roger? Sounds an awful fucking lot like they need a fire bow. Sucks to suck.
Yeah. So anyway, it was. I had the electricity back within a couple of days, but. I know people personally who didn't get it back. And let's put it this way, if we had done this on Wednesday, there would have still been about 50,000 people without power in Louisiana because of this storm. It was 1 mile an hour below Category 4. And it was a small, fast-moving, compact storm, though. It was all over and done with in a few hours. So, it came through. I think I told you it had started raining hard about half an hour before the podcast, before we started recording. And after the power failed, within another couple hours, it was all over. Storm was gone. Clouds were clearing. You could see stars in the sky. Of course, no one had any electricity, but it was...
Dude, what if power went out during the election? I was just saying that would be a shit show, but now I'm thinking like we're in a shit show right now. I don't know why I need to throw in another factor.
There were polling places in Louisiana that had to bring in generators because they didn't have power still.
Should have had a fire bow. I don't care. Fucking should have had a fire. If you're gonna leave Africa, you fucking best be strapped with your fire bow. That's just on you. You should have a break in case of emergency fire bow. Frankly, I don't have any sympathy. I mean, I feel for them, but you know what? Those who suffer remember, so, they're going to learn. I'm the first pussy that would be crying if the AC went off and it got to 7.
I can tell you don't live where there are hurricanes.
No.
One thing that was nice is usually after the hurricane passes, it's 90 degrees and the humidity is 100% because that's the weather that spawns hurricanes. But after this thing passed, it was a cold front that pushed it past. And so it was like 70 degrees and it was, temperate. It was really pleasant to be outside, which never happens after a hurricane. Normal, they always tell you if you stay for the hurricane, the power's going to go out and then you're going to sweat your balls off because it's going to be 90 degrees, it's going to be 100% humidity, and you're not going to have air conditioning. Well, if this thing passed, it was like, fuck staying in the house. I'm going to go outside. It was beautiful.
You know what it is? It's an abusive relationship. It just beat the shit out of you, and then it threw you some cab money. And it's like, clean yourself up. Go outside. Look how beautiful it is. You're like, it's beautiful. And you're like, yeah, I'll be here next week to fuck up your house again.
Yeah, well, you got to look at the abusive boyfriend that you have. We have hurricanes. Other people have earthquakes and tornadoes. And honestly, having known some people who live in tornado country, I would much rather deal with the hurricane.
Yeah.
Because you can see it coming. And run for your life.
You can see it coming. A tornado is just a random mugging.
Yeah, a tornado is a random mugging. An earthquake is a random mugging.
A hurricane is the mafia collecting, right?
Yeah, it's like,
you know they're coming. Just have it ready. Just have it ready. You'll get by it. You always do. Just make sure you have your payment. Yeah, a tornado is more like a fucking crazy guy out of a mental asylum high on bath salts, and he just beats you to death with a
machete.
Yeah, just and he just doesn't even take your money. That's what a tornado is. Yeah. Well, again, just the value of this podcast dropping off exponentially. So, we're gonna call that the Tommy Roger theorem. It's gonna be like, there's a theorem known that as a podcast goes past a certain point, the content will just drop off dramatically. Maybe we could map it with actual like viewership. I could see who drops off, and it's like around the 2.5 hour mark, Roger and Tommy are just shown. It could become a whole theorem.
I don't know if we have the statistics on that, though.
In time.
YouTube should be able. YouTube records everything, don't they? They should be able to tell how much of it people
I can literally go in and I could tell you when everyone starts stop watching.
Oh,
it's crazy. Yeah, it's creepy. You can go in and you can see like how many No, I'm not kidding. You can see how many like 37 to 41-year-old males in New Zealand stopped watching at hour 3 on their mobile device. They know everything. That's the shit they give me for free just because I have a channel. They know they have it all. They have it all.
They've been hanging out with Facebook too long.
They have, those bastards. Well, you know what? The moral of the story is have a fire bow. That's all you need. Fire bow 2024. I provide the basics. Fire bow 2024. Well, Roger, let's wrap this bitch up, and everybody listening, check out Roger's book, Metamorphosis of Prime Intellect, in the description in the top comment, as well as his other works at localroger.com. That's all I got, Roger. Till next Sunday.
There we are.
All right, my man.
See you next week.
All right, my man. I'll see you, buddy. Take care. Stay safe. God bless America. Everybody out there, love each other. Civil War, although great for technology, it's not going to be great for us. So stay safe. Love each other. I don't know. Remember what's important in life. Peace, Roger.